little more. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Close that door. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Padujikacharya Ashtotar Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Padujikacharya Ashtotar Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Kwantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, let me make sure I got the right verse here. Okay. Narayana Namaskritya Narang Chaiv Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavad-Gita Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam, and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil. And loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 30th day of September 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order. Chapter 26. King Puranjan goes to the forest to hunt, and his queen becomes angry. Text number 15. Natatai tarhi rochante griheshu grahasampadaha yadina syad grihe mata patni va pati devata vyange ratihiva pragya ko namasi tadinavat natatai tarhi rochante griheshu grahasampadaha yadina syad grihe mata patni va pati devata vyange ratihiva pragya ko namasi tadinavat natatai tarhi rochante griheshu grahasampadaha yadina syad grihe mata patni va pati devata vyange ratihiva pragya ko namasi tadinavat natatai tarhi rochante griheshu grahasampadaha yadina syad grihe mata patni va pati devata vyange ratihiva pragya ko namasi tadinavat natatai tarhi rochante griheshu grahasampadaha yadina syad grihe mata patni va pati devata vyange ratihiva pragya ko namasi tadinavat natatai tarhi rochante griheshu grahasampadaha yadina syad grihe mata patni va pati devata vyange ratihiva pragya ko namasi tadinavat natatai tarhi rochante griheshu grahasampadaha yadina syad grihe mata pati devata vyange ratihiva pragya ko namasi tadinavat not tata like before etarhi at this moment rochante become pleasing griheshu at home grihasampadaha all household paraphernalia yadi if not syat there is grihe at home mata mother patni wife va or pati devata devoted to the husband vyange without wheels rate in a chariot iva like pragya learned man kaha who is that nama indeed asita would sit dinavat like a poverty-stricken creature. Translation. King Puranjan said, I do not understand why my household paraphernalia does not attract me as before. I think that if there is neither mother nor devoted wife at home, the home is like a chariot without wheels. Where is the fool who will sit down on such an unworkable chariot? Purport. The great politician Chanakya Pandit said, I'll say you say, oh, no, I'll just say, Mata yasughe nasti bhaya cha priyavadini aranyam tena gantavyam yataranyam tatagvaham. If a person has neither a mother nor a pleasing wife at home, he should leave home and go to the forest, because for him there is no difference between the forest and home. The real mata, or mother, is devotional service to the Lord, and the real patni, or devoted wife, is a wife who helps her husband execute religious principles in devotional service. These two things are required for a happy home. Actually, a woman is supposed to be the energy of the man. Historically, in the background of every great man, there is either a mother or a wife. One's household life is very successful if he has both a good wife and mother. In such a case, everything about household affairs and all the paraphernalia in the house becomes very pleasing. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had both a good mother and pleasing wife, and he was very happy at home. Nonetheless, for the benefit of the whole human race, he took sannyas and left both his mother and wife. In other words, it is essential that one have both a good mother and wife in order to become perfectly happy at home. Otherwise, home life has no meaning. Unless one is religiously guided by intelligence and renders devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his home can never become very pleasing to a saintly person. In other words, if a man has a good mother and a good wife, there is no need of his taking sannyas. That is, unless it is absolutely necessary, as it was for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Salakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, King Puranjan, Puranjan means the living entity in the body, all of us. So he's king of his body. In other words, he's the ruler of the city of 9 gates. But now he's gone out to the forest and engaged in unnecessary and excessive hunting. And he's tired and he wants to go back home. So he comes back home, but he can't find his wife there. First he takes a bath and he has the proper food stuff and all this, but his wife isn't around. So where's the wife? So what's the use, he says. Without the wife and mother, my home isn't pleasing to me. And Prabhupada quotes Chanakya Pandit to the same effect. But then Prabhupada makes it clear that the real mother is devotional service to the Lord. Now, in the previous purport, we had the mother as the intelligence. Previously, we've had the wife as a personified intelligence. So, the point is that whether it's spiritual or material, you need some inspiration to work. You need some inspiration to do things. On the material side, that usually comes in the form of your household life, sex life, children, right, and the wife, and in any civilized society, when the mother gets old, she'll live with you. Real family life, as Prabhupada points out, is the extended family you find in Vedic culture in India even today, where certainly your mother and father will live for you, and sometimes other parts of the family. So without that, the home is barren. If there's not a loving wife and a loving mother there, then what's the impetus to work? It becomes empty. So that's really the core of material life, is this household life, material household life, but there's inspiration that goes on like that. Now, of course, when it comes to the spiritual life, when it comes to Krishna consciousness, we know that that's a big illusion, that you really can't be happy there, and it ultimately leads to self-defeat. As Prahlad Maharaj so graphically describes, Matir na Krishna paratak svatova mito vibhajyate griha vratanam adanda goba vishatam tamisam punak panaschavatachavananam. In materialistic household life, where there's no impetus but material happiness there, material pleasure, then there's really no chance of turning the mind to Krishna. If you've taken a firm vow, not maybe formally, but this is your determination, and it's all committed to material activities, building up the house life. Nowadays, the artificial life, you have the nuclear family, and you find that practically every home there's some crisis. The kids getting into some drugs, or the marriage is weakened because of some distress, some other person or something going on. So it's rare to find, even today, in Western society anyway, a happy, stable home life that's going on year after year. But be that as it may, Prahlad is describing even materialistic household life at any age, from way back in Satya Yuga, and So if that's your focus, then your senses are by nature out of control, because you're living for sense gratification. So adanta gobhir. The senses are out of control. Vishatam tamisram. And you're simply entering more and more into darkness. And then this the famous phrase that everyone can memorize, if you can memorize the whole verse, is Punak punas charvata charvananam. Again and again chewing the chewed. In other words, looking for pleasure and sense gratification. You've had some variety of sex life, you've experienced it, but you're trying again and again with some false variety, looking outside the home. Or you can look on life after life. You've had so many other partners, it's basically the same thing, and you're still going after it, So that's the sure sign of taking another birth and being very tightly bound up by material consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada gives some other instruction here. First of all, he describes Lord Chaitanya's how his household was ideal. He had certainly a loving mother, Nishachi Devi, and a loving wife, Lakshmi Devi died, but he got Vishnupriya, the second wife. So he had a happy home life. But he was on fire with Sankirtan fever, spreading Krishna consciousness. And there was that experience where some of the students were critical because he wasn't teaching them exactly how he was before, Yeah, so anyway, and then he was chanting the Gopi Gopi in his ecstasy, and they were criticizing him for that. So he said, okay, so it's better if I take sannyas, because then everyone will respect me. Even these ignorant students, they'll bow down, they'll get benefit that way, and of course expand his field of preaching. So he did that, and it's a wonderful account of how, as soon as he took sannyas, he said, "I'm going to Vrindavan." He didn't eat, didn't do anything for 3 days. He was going to Vrindavan with Nityananda, right, in the madness of ecstasy of prema bhakti, highest level. But all the residents of Navadvip and Advaitacharya, they didn't get hadn't had a chance to say goodbye properly, So they kind of tricked him, coming back to Shantipur. And there was this wonderful festival, and this moving scene between him and his mother. His mother came, and she was crying. And he said, I took sannyas and madness. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do, She could have said, okay, come back to the home, give it up. But she knew that would have been a great discredit for him, in the society. So, okay, just make Puri your headquarters. That's close enough. I'll get news of you. That'll be solace for me, And actually, to get more than news, they would send representative down, and he would actually come there and take the prasadam on the spiritual level, and even physically he visited. So anyway, that's and as Prabhupada says at the end of the purport, if there's this ideal house, now the key is that the wife is helping you in preaching. Prabhupada was a householder, everyone knows that. But he found so much friction in trying to preach. There was so much opposition. And I won't get into the details. So that was one of the main impetuses why, finally internally, Bhaktisiddhanta was appearing to him in dreams, and encouraging him to take sannyas for preaching. And finally he took Vanaprastha, the whole history. But ideally, and there are many households in ISKCON where you have the man and a woman preaching together, and when a child comes and they raise the child in Krishna consciousness, it can be done. So it becomes a impetus for preaching, and it helps. There's a kind of a fortress effect where they're protected against unnecessary sense gratification, and devoted to the mission, Lord Chaitanya's mission, and ISKCON mission. And so it can be that way. But as we'll see in subsequent verses, Puranjan that's not going to happen to Puranjan. He finds his wife and he consoles her. He went out alone and he ignored her and so forth. But then he gets into just enjoying his senses. He comes into that mood. So the idea here is that whatever situation we find ourselves, now of course we can transform that situation, but the focus has to be, okay, what's best for my achieving the mission of human life, which is myself becoming Krishna conscious, and if one comes into the orbit of ISKCON and the Krishna conscious movement, there has to be a big element of preaching there. How can I give what I've been given? How can I pass it on? Because if you become Krishna conscious, not even fully Krishna conscious, but you appreciate the value of Krishna consciousness, and you understand from the philosophy that it's all important, and more important than anything else, then you should become eager to pass it on to others, to give it to as many as possible. Seeing every living entity, especially human beings who can take it, as your God brothers, as your dear friends. That's real spiritual vision, and that's what Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad-Gita, and all our Shastra like that. So this whole, again, taking the long view, stepping back and seeing what this lesson is all about with this extended allegory, is that here's a individual who represents every living entity, embodied and conditioned by material energy, and his experience there is kind of a template, or kind of an example of material life. How you can get bewildered and completely entrapped by this material energy. If you don't have another source of knowledge and a method, a means by which you can perceive yourself as a spiritual being and begin to experience the other world of Krishna consciousness. And it is kind of a world that we can't see now, we can't perceive with our gross senses because they're too impure. But when you meet somebody, or when you encounter somebody who is experiencing that directly, and the seed of faith is planted, that, behind this facade, this material facade, and all of this ever-changing experience I'm having, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, sometimes exuberant and sometimes depressed, what's behind it? What's the ground of being? What is the source of everything? This is where you really become a human being, a tato brahma jigyasa. Not just going with the flow, as we used to say, whatever is happening in the moment, and trying to enjoy this and avoid this, and which in some ways was the hippie ethic, and which was really a failure. I remember my own little experience. I was kind of dipping my foot into the water of being a hippie, but I never really was a full-on hippie. But I made my pilgrimage to San Francisco, but I was a year late, Instead of the Summer of Love, I came a year later, 1968. And there was this concert that had happened called Altamont. I don't know if you remember that. Where it was said that there was a before and after Altamont. Because there was a big concert, but the drug of choice had changed. Instead of just marijuana and LSD, there was this amphetamines. I don't know if methamphetamine was available at that time. But everyone was hopped up. And there was some violence, and some bikers or something. And I think somebody got killed. And 3 people got killed. No, you know better than me. And so, what happened to peace and love? The whole ethos had changed because there's really no knowledge behind it. There's no discipline. There was no what we have in Krishna consciousness. So I missed that. Which was But Srila Prabhupada was this timing. Krishna gave him the timing just perfect. He arrived in 1965, struggled for a while, to get his, start something, and then just at the right moment, 1966, he came down to the Lower East Side, and there were some really intelligent people who weren't blowing their minds out with heavy-duty drugs, heroin and methamphetamine, but they were taking LSD and marijuana, and that was, I'm not recommending it. but it opened them up to other, Eastern thought and all these different things, So in that context, Prabhupada was able to give them the genuine article. And the seed was planted, there's a whole volume of that the Leelamrita describing it. And the rest is history. But the idea is that every living being is originally a devotee of Krishna. We've all left. And we're in the few human society. There's only 400,000 species. But forget species, just count organisms. In other words, examples. There's 7.5 billion human beings on this earth planet. How many mosquitoes are there? How many ants are there? There's trillions and quadrillions of others. And they're all just as much living entities as we are. Right? But they're suffering because of some sinful activity more. And the consciousness is way, way reduced. There's no way that they could benefit fully. Let's say the fortunate bug that crawls in here, and is hopefully not crushed, but hears a little kirtan, gets a little, eats a little prasadam, is spilled on the floor. Very fortunate. But basically, to really benefit from what Srila Prabhupada has given, you need to be a human being, and you need to be civilized, and you need to be somewhat receptive, somewhat inquisitive. A lot of times devotees came because there's some trouble in their life. They're looking for some peace, something like that. And often it comes because you get a book, and you don't know why, and there's such a nice devotee and whatever. But it piques your curiosity. And that curiosity is a most valuable thing in your life. If it brings you to the temple or brings you to the proper site on the internet or something in pursuit. So, and ultimately, you find yourself, hopefully, reading Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's a, each canto has its own character. I don't know if you know, the second canto was written when Prabhupada was in India. The first canto, everyone knows the first canto was written, he brought it with him, obviously. But he also had written the second canto, and he brought it with him in manuscript form. And it has its own flavor, very much, the first canto, he's relating so much of that encounter of King Parikshit with the Kali personified and the cow and the bull representative, and so much there is available to comment on the world affairs. And we've been reading. Sometimes we read these quotes from Prabhupada's purpose. And wow, that just came out of the headlines, The build-up of artificial society and how it ruins the finer sentiments of human life, and it's the modern world is in a very dangerous situation because of the nuclear weapons, and it's I grew up. You remember that? Growing up in the 60s, 70s, the Cold War, the arms race. The sword of Damocles. Anybody heard of the sword of Damocles? It's a Greek myth where there's this sword that's hung just by a thread, a string, say, and it can fall at any time and kill the person underneath it. And that's the whole world was like that when you had the Soviet Union, threatening, and you had the Cold War and all these different things. Then we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was like, this is it. I was 14 years old. I think you were too young to remember that. But it was like, we've been thinking about this. As a kid growing up, you have dreams, the hydrogen bomb blowing up in your head, And then, so now, a little older, but whoa, here it is. There's bombs down there in Cuba, which we can't stop them. They're too close, and I was living on Long Island, they destroy New York. Bob Dylan wrote this song, "A Hard Rain Is Gonna Fall." He was sitting in New York. It was about that Cuban Missile Crisis, that the whole thing is coming down. So it's in some ways it's slightly like what it's like in this COVID. Suddenly the whole world is affected by this threat that's obviously a killer, and we have no way to counteract it. And everybody's got to change their behavior. It was a little different because it was just a threat. If the threat had come real, everyone would die basically. So, that was a shocker. Of course, we survived it. But as I grew up after that, these ultimate questions always were in my mind because we had come so close to mass annihilation in the film. So the point I'm making is that what Srila Prabhupada has given and what this movement presents is an actual solution to all problems. How could it be the solution to all problems? And people come forward, well, I have this problem, I can't pay my rent, I have this disease, Yeah, you have all those problems because you have and are identifying yourself with the material body. And that is your main problem. And that's not taught in the schools. That you have to come to, and read Prabhupada's books about that. That's the idea that there's a soul. We're just now in the second chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, reading it again. And that's the main lesson. To try to get Arjuna off the bodily platform. His whole argument was based on the relationship between the body, his body, and all these other, And so that, and to understand your spirit soul and to learn how to act as a spirit soul in relation to the Supreme Spirit Krishna. So you can stay on that platform. Just understanding your spirit is not enough. You have to learn how to act as a spirit so you can actually achieve the ultimate benefit, which is to regain your spiritual form and return back to God. So the material impetus is based on sex life and based on making money and having these comforts in material life, which is also temporary. There's always a crisis in that kind of a life, sooner or later, because it's the world of change. It's Bhavasagara, the ocean of birth, death, old age, and disease. And so that means that whatever situation you have now, that's going to change. So what's the point of striving and spending all your energy on some material situation, which is going to change? Your body will change, your mind will change. I've just been studying again reviewing the first canto, that second chapter, where Sutta Goswami is answering the question, what is the Supreme Dharma? Okay, who knows the answer? What is the Supreme Dharma is? Savai Pungsang. Yeah, I know. I'm looking for the shloka. Savai Pungsang paro dharmo yato bhakti rhokchide ahoitukiya patayata yatma supasidati. That the Supreme Dharma, it's not Dharma artha kama moksha. That's made clear in the subsequent verses. Dharma is not meant for artha and enjoying your senses. Dharma is meant for evoking real Dharma, evoking your love of God, your real bhakti. So, and it has to be, if you're practicing the Dharma, unmotivated, no material motivation, and uninterrupted. So someone wants to come forward, I'm practicing, because Dharma is often translated as religion. Okay, is there any material motivation? And is it uninterrupted? Not once a week, and go to church or mosque or somewhere, No, every moment of every day. That's what it comes down to. Of living your life in such a way that your activities, your thoughts, your whole lifestyle is geared toward reawakening your natural love for God. You see? And then he describes one of the first benefit of this, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Payojitaha. Janati. It's a very easy word to remember, the meaning of. It means generate. It's practically the same English word. It generates this Vasudeva Bhagavati, this kind of devotion, uninterrupted, unmotivated, bhakti, that's simply for Krishna's pleasure. When one engages into Krishna or Vasudeva, it quickly generates two things, vairagya and knowledge. Detachment and knowledge. They go together. So then he gives another criterion for what's real Dharma. The next verse. Dharmak svansitak pungsam vishvakshena katasayat nodpadayet yaditatim shamevahi kevalam. You may be practicing some so-called religion, but are you becoming very, very more and more interested in hearing about God and hearing about Krishna? If not, then shamevahi kevalam. It's a lot of hard work for no result. Bhagavatam doesn't mince any words. Right at the beginning, Dharmak projita kaita votra. Here in the Bhagavatam, no cheating religion. We're not compromising, There's no karma kanda here. They work very hard, sacrifices, go to heaven. No, that's all condemned. So, this is the anyabhilasha dashinyam, without any other desire. So that's what the Bhagavatam is all about. But at the same time, you have description of varnashram, 7th canto, all the duties, there. But it's clear from the second chapter, what is the central point of varnashram? atak pumbir dvida shrestha varnashrama vibhagasha sonasitasya dharmasya siddhir haritoshanam. The whole idea of both the varnas and the ashrams is successful when all the activities are geared toward pleasing Hari, pleasing Krishna. Otherwise, it can degenerate into this caste consciousness, casteism, where you're just, the so-called Brahmins are lording it over the other castes. That's a complete corruption. So the Bhagavad, this is the beginning of the Bhagavatam, and the rest of the Bhagavatam is variations on the same theme. All of the verses and all of the pastimes, of course, leading up to the 10th canto. But there's plenty of philosophy in the 10th canto. I read recently the prayers of the Naga Patnis. There's a lot of philosophy in there. They're desperate to save their husband, and they're offering these beautiful prayers to Krishna, and he fulfills their desire. He doesn't kill Kaliya. He chastised him. He actually was so purified. You remember how Kaliya became so purified and offered him the Kaustubha jam and other things, and then departed for Raivataka. What was the name of the island? Yeah, I know it's Fiji, but what was it called then? Raivataka? I forget the name of it. Anyway, so here, Srila Prabhupada is talking about the ideal family life when there's a wife who supports the husband in preaching. They preach together. Take care of the home. It's a temple for Krishna, and the center. What is the center? What is the center of our lives? What is the center of our activities and our efforts in life? Is to serve Krishna, become more and more Krishna conscious, and to be examples for others, and to give Krishna consciousness to others. This brings a tremendous amount of joy and peace, which people are looking for. They'll never find it on the material side. This whole country, the whole world is like biting their fingernails. What's going on in the United States? I mean, the statue of the United States has fallen on the ground from this COVID thing. Of all the countries, we have the most deaths, the highest rate. I mean, it's ridiculous. People in other countries where you had, people were locked down, they followed the rules months ago. They've returned basically to normal. I mean, now they have a little surge here, or here or there, but then they get into it again. I'm not going to get into that. So the point is that, and not just that. Aside from that, the political situation in America has become scary. Let's just put it that way for scary people. So we've lost sight. Okay, I think this we can agree on, that the vast majority of people have lost sight of the actual mission of human life, and understanding, the God, and that they're meant to be in relation to God and serve God, and so there's a lot of fear in the country and in the world. So Krishna consciousness helps with that problem. It helps with that problem because we read these books. I mean, we can read so much about what happens when Hiranyakashipu takes over the universe. That's a problem, right? You can imagine how much fear that created. And Kamsa, our Shastras are full of this, of how devotional service, Krishna is concerned that Dharma, pure Dharma, reign in the world. Yada yada hi dharma saglana bhavati bharata. And so he makes arrangements for the resurrection and the cure, fixing that problem, as he says explicitly in the Bhagavad-Gita. And so he's not always present, obviously. He comes for a certain amount of time. But he leaves his books, he leaves his devotees, and he's always present in our hearts to give us good instruction. So by the proper understanding given by genuine Shastra presented by pure devotees, and by the concerted and serious practice of the principles of devotional service, we can come to the point of peacefulness or tolerance even in most difficult situations. And we find that many people are taking shelter of the process of devotional service. They maybe can't come to the temples, but they're getting online. There's big readings going on of Prabhupada's books that wasn't happening before. and because you feel the benefit, the need for a safe harbor in these troubled times, so to speak. So this is this great allegory that we're reading now. Would say, and we'll see he gets totally into sense gratification, and then the inevitable time factor comes to play, and his body starts breaking down. The whole thing. And so this is a universal story, really. It's meant to be a lesson for everybody that there's no shelter in sense gratification. It's every kind of sense gratification is a kind of drug. And anyone who's had experience, is that it's a high, it's some kind of experience, but then there's a fall off, and you're worse off than you were before, And unfortunately, just like with alcohol, we can use alcohol as like it's present even in these days. You're doing damage. You're doing damage to your body. You're doing damage to your brain. It becomes, and you do enough of that, and you become a basket case. You can't really practice because you need your facilities, your senses, your good mind to practice devotional service properly. So that's the four regs are so important because each one of them is kind of a very addictive force. It's a powerful thing on the material side. There's even a verse. What is that? I'm forgetting the Sanskrit. That doesn't mention gambling, but the sex life and meat eating and intoxication is always a temptation for embodied beings, So that keeps us, our mind clear, our body more healthy, so that we can understand Krishna consciousness, we can practice Krishna consciousness without a lot of strain. It's feasible to do it. So I'll read this again, this translation for this 6th line verse. I do not understand why my household paraphernalia does not attract me as before. I think that if there is neither a mother nor devoted wife at home, the home is like a chariot without wheels. Where is the fool who will sit down on such an unworkable chariot? Damara Kumarji. We have the mic. Uh-oh. There we go.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.
Thank you for the nice class, Prabhu.
Hare
I just have a comment and a question. Comment. The verse is about how the couple, the man and wife, should be a team for preaching. And this is an interesting comment, but I remember the last time His Grace Parameshwar Prabhu was here for traveling Sankirtan. We all know him, stalwart brahmachari.
Right.
Probably has 20 years of practicing brahmacharya under his belt. He said that we were glorifying Tukaram Prabhu, and he was explaining how if we can do the grihastha ashram like that, and then we all should be grihasthas.
Why 6 kids? You can have 100. I mean, that's right. 6, 7. That's it.
Right. There's that statement by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur about.
Yeah, he said it similar.
Right. My question is, you were speaking about how for Srila Prabhupada it seemed as if he didn't know what he was doing when he came, and
he didn't know what?
He didn't know what he was doing. He was trying to figure things out. Those first few months he was in America, but it was all Krishna's divine arrangement. It wasn't just it just wasn't happening. It was kind of like there's something behind it all. But could you speak a little bit about how hopefully for everyone who's a devotee there's some plan alongside their goals to spread Krishna consciousness in some way, but we may not feel that immediately. But obviously we see in the life of Srila Prabhupada that he just was trusting in Krishna, and just trusted that when the time was right, things would come about. And so for us, we may have our plans, our desires, our goals. Things may not be happening at the moment, but could you speak a little bit about how we can trust more?
Yeah, okay. I think I get it. We can always refer to the Upadeshamrita. We can always get benefit in the Upadeshamrita. Utsaha nishaya dharyat tattad karma pravartanat. So the enthusiasm, determination, and patience. Prabhupada was the exemplar for that. He had his mission. And that prayer, that song, Makane Bhagavad Dharma, where he just placed himself at the lotus feet of Krishna. You brought me here, we're relying on you to make my power of speech adequate so they'll understand. I don't have anything, I'm just your puppet, make me dance if you like. It's just a wonderful inspiration. Down through the ages it'll be an inspiration. So he showed that, in those months you describe. One of the things that came out of there that we may forget is the whole introduction to the Bhagavad-Gita. He dictated that up in his room on that reel to reel. That's where that came out of.
It was during the blackout. They had that big blackout. During that time.
It's hard to imagine because he had to plug in that. But it may be right, close to that, at that time. But anyway, he was making a few contacts and preaching, and at the retreat center that they had, I forget what it's called. But you're right, and then he would go down to the port, and see the office again, and he had his ticket going back, but he never actually got on the boat. The point is that Prabhupada was determined, and he was, and trusting in Krishna and trusting the power of the holy name. And so he did what he could in the environment he was in. Just like when he went to Pennsylvania, Butler, he got to preach in the YMCA. There was that article for the, in the paper. There was whatever he could in that, he did. But that wasn't nearly enough. He was writing letters to, and then he came back. He eventually came to New York. So the lesson is, the example is to be fixed in your mission, and your service, and then become determined, provided it's authorized, consult with the superiors and everything, and have faith that if you try properly and you maintain your sadhana nicely, that success will come. It may come in a way that's completely expected. You may be moved around and have even a whole other service or another unexpected way in which you're performing that service. But the idea is that your determination and your practice and your grounded practices, the 4 regs, the rounds, programs, everything, studying, that's a given. That has to be a basis. Then your particular service that you do, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's an authorized service and you're putting yourself into it. You may be moved over here to do a similar service or, a different, but that's Krishna's, arrangement. I mean, I can give stories I won't give now, of my own life where I was moved here, moved there, different service, all within the realm of editing and, producing books. But you have to stick with it, that Krishna's looking for that as your proof of sincerity. And then sometimes very suddenly, sometimes over time, he'll put you in a situation where you feel happy and confident and you like the service and it's helping others to become Krishna conscious. So there's a test of our determination. But we've been given the tools to attain that kind of mentality. This foundation is always the strict sadhana. And then from there, you're becoming purified, you're advancing. And so then when you're ready, Krishna puts you in a situation or gives you a breakthrough in your service that you're already trying to do. And you get more enthusiasm. Oh, I can easily see Krishna's hand in this, And so that's my experience, and I think it's borne out. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.